Welcome to UNCAGED, the show that celebrates leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we have Azuree Montoute-Lewis on the show. How are you, Azuree?
I am doing just fine. Very, very nice to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. Azuree is the global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Hill+Knowlton Strategies. Hill+Knowlton is a company that anybody who's worked in the communications industry knows it is probably one of the most storied and successful communications companies globally. And Hill+Knowlton Strategies has been really the strategic arm and branch of that business. And so I'm excited to learn more about what you guys are up to at
Mhm.
Hill+Knowlton Strategies. But before we get there, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that warm introduction. So I'm currently, as you mentioned, the global head of diversity, equity, inclusion at H&K. And I have spent the last year working with our CEO, who is truly committed to building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture at H&K. We are a very global firm. We do focus a lot on diversity, but we also want to make sure that our culture and our environment is welcoming, it's safe, it's fair. And much of the work that I do is really focused on putting infrastructure, process, and really building relationships and connections around the world just to ensure that we're living up to that aspiration. I've been in this role now for about a year, and it's been a wonderful year. The employees I've met here at H&K are exactly as you'd imagine for a very storied organization such as ours, and it's been a wonderful experience. Prior to H&K, I was in the financial services industry for about 20 years. I spent my time with several of the very large banks, the J.P. Morgan Chases, the Citigroups of the world, and most recently, I was at a credit ratings agency called Fitch Group as well. And this is my
Yes.
second turn of doing working in an organization where I was focused on building their diversity, equity, inclusion strategy globally. So it's been a great career.
That's amazing. So, I mean, every one of those companies that you've been part of has an incredible story in and of themselves. But being part of Hill+Knowlton Strategies and in this role that you have right now, what are the key things that you guys are working on to really drive D&I in a company like Hill+Knowlton Strategies, and I imagine in the communications industry broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the last year, I spent really the first 3 to 6 months just listening. I went around the world talking to all of our leaders, our employees to understand what is the H&K experience, and more importantly, aspirationally, what do we want to build? What do we want to become,
Mhm.
both tomorrow and in the future? And so from that, I was able to build out a diversity, equity, inclusion strategy that was focused on multiple different levers of organizational process and behavior that would have a strong and positive impact on our culture. So, right now, we have a strategy that we're focused on that looks at both our talent acquisition space, it looks at our employee experience and our ability to retain talent. We're looking at cultural learning and development. Like, how do we understand each other? How do we understand the audiences that our clients are serving? Then we're looking at both our leadership and talent processes as well. So, looking at performance management and promotions and ensuring that those processes are without bias and that they are fair and equitable to all of our employees. And then finally, of course, probably the most important stakeholder that we have is our clients. And how do we engage with our clients and our communities and really engage in diverse suppliers for the work that we do. And so that is very broadly our diversity strategy. And now, as we're going into the fall, we're looking at really building out a learning journey. So, how do we engage our employees in reflection and awareness about who they are, their personal identities, how they manifest themselves in the workplace, and then how do we better engage with each other? How do we lead with empathy? And many of those topics are going to be a part of that learning journey. And then also building connections for employees is very important. And so now we're on a path to creating employee resource groups that'll be global in nature, that'll bring communities of employees together that are either of a particular community, but also allies for a community. And how do we bring them closer together and closer to H&K as a result? So that is what the end of 2021 is going to look like. And then 2022 will go to level 2.
That's great. Yes, I love that. Go to level 2. It just seems that if we look at almost every aspect of communication strategy for a business today, every aspect of it touches in some way back to this topic of diversity and inclusion. And so I just love to kind of get your perspective on some of those broader trends that we're seeing, that the work that you're doing kind of plays a part and a role in.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about DE&I as a concept, a structure, a focus area is firmly entrenched in culture, right? And so the culture of an organization, the norms, the values, the beliefs that permeate an organization, DE&I is in the front and center of that experience. And so DE&I drives engagement and drives employee satisfaction. It drives creativity and innovation, which ultimately has very significant positive business impact, increased revenue and profitability, and ultimately success for an organization. And so now in this pandemic world in which we're living in, where we're thinking about how do we continue to create and innovate, we need to have diverse perspectives from around the world to weigh in and bring their insights and their perspectives so that we can make the best decisions, right? And
Yeah.
so between the pandemic and then also the pressures on our talent and ensuring that we are creating environments where our talent want to be engaged with us and want to join us and work with us are supremely important. And I would tell you that that probably has always been the case, right?
Yeah.
From the time that businesses were starting, that's always been something that's very important. But I think now, where we have shifted from a global society with a focus on equity and a focus on fairness and ensuring that people from all backgrounds and cultures have equal access to opportunities is something that's very important. So DE&I sits at the center of that, which is really making it supremely important for our businesses today.
I'd love to ask you kind of a question because you're playing the global role, and you know the global landscape for DE&I imagine has different dimensions, different priorities versus what we see here in the U.S. And I'd
Yes.
be curious how you're balancing that out, or bringing the two to support one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, there's never a one size fits all, even in the US, right? So when you think
Right.
about globally ensuring that we have inclusion, you have to take into it local cultural norms and expectations in that. And so my first opinion is always just to listen to
Right.
understand what are the norms and expectations of that specific market. I said, but no matter where you are, we're all humans. And
Right.
as humans, we look to be included. We want to be a part. We want to feel welcome. We want to feel safe. And that is who we are on a very biological level. So even if the focus is maybe on race and ethnicity, for example, or LGBT is not the same around the world, there is a community that we want to ensure has a seat at the table. And so
Right.
gender is probably one of the most global affinity groups that most markets around the world are caring for because women really need to have a seat at the table and need to be present and included and welcomed in a very inclusive way. And so as you move around the world, though your focus might shift and might change, at the end of the day, we're all trying to make sure that all of our employees, everyone, is being treated fairly and has the right opportunities and can feel included and have a sense of belonging in our
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah, no, I think those are really good points. Certainly, the leadership roles, the senior leadership roles, and making sure that there's true equity across the board will shape that global agenda going forward. And so it's absolutely critical to get those elements in line. Let me shift gears a little bit here because this has been quite a watershed year, a moment where people's lives have completely shifted in many cases. The way we work has changed. I'd be curious just to hear how things have changed for how you at Hill+Knowlton Strategies are approaching things, and
Mhm.
also just kind of like how you've survived in the whole process.
Yes. Thinking back on, I've been having conversations with the last couple of days about thinking about our return to office strategies and what kind of hybrid model, we're going to adopt as an organization now we're moving through a different place. I think this was a collective experience where so many of us have experienced levels of grief, just in the loss of family members and friends and community neighbors throughout this pandemic. I think there's been a level of anxiety and uncertainty around when it's going to end. How are we going to deal with this? Can we adapt? Are we able to find that level of resilience and grit to just keep pushing forward, just in this very uncertain and unstable environment? And I think one of the things that Hill+Knowlton did really, really well is that we were putting our focus on our people. We know that our people are our greatest asset and really what makes our company the great company that it is. And so I think so many of the decisions that we made around flexibility, around giving our employees the resources that they would need to be able to manage kind of everything that's going on around them and what was happening at work in the day to day and serving our clients. I think we put that at the forefront, and that has enabled us to continue to move forward as an organization. I just think, generally speaking, in this VUCA world that we are, is volatile, it's uncertain. It's just very ambiguous. It's just a difficult time, and it requires a level of transformation that I think is going to be continued to required of us. And so when I think about specifically the DE&I work that I have in front of me, like it really is a change management process. I am examining things, analyzing things, and really challenging the status quo of what is going on right now. And I think that level of change that is required to continue to move us through this very uncertain time takes a lot of consistent and ongoing effort and focus. And I think that is something that H&K has done really well. We have kept our focus. We've stayed the course in many ways. And I think we have done well because of it.
Yeah. Look, I always try to see things from a glass half full perspective. And certainly, I mean, the last couple of years have been challenging for so many people on a personal level and a professional level. But it's also been a moment for people to really assess what's meaningful to them, and that's been, personally, it's been exciting to see those transformations. And I think as a society, it's allowed us to perhaps see things more clearly, right? So the DE&I space, maybe a silver lining of this perhaps is that we're accelerating stuff that should have happened years ago. I mean, I'm just curious if you're seeing that, but I feel that in the work that we're doing as a company, and I'd just be curious if you're experiencing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have many colleagues across industries that are doing the work of DE&I, and I would say the majority of us feels that this feels very different. I've been doing DE&I now for probably close to 15 years, and there has always been ebbs and flows in terms of the focus that has been placed on DE&I, specifically within organizations, as far as it can drive culture.
Mhm.
And what we found is that this time, it doesn't feel like a moment in time. It actually feels like a shift, a
Yeah.
societal shift that has been driven by just the awakening to the fact that there are very different lived experiences for people around the world, depending on their backgrounds, their race and ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, and all of these things. I think we've known to be true, but I think just the past year, with us slowing down in the pandemic, with the murder of George Floyd as a catalyst, with all of the things that we've experienced, I think we are constantly aware now of the disadvantages that some of our friends and families experience as a result. So I feel like now we are at a moment in time that I think we're going to be able to put permanent and sustainable change and make progress that will change the face of our organizations for
Absolutely.
the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I mean, if we think about that future, I mean, I know that before we started today, we talked a little bit about that, but I mean, as you look forward that over the next 12 months, 2 years, what do you think are going to be some of the exciting milestones or trends that we'll see?
It's interesting. I think there's a lot going on. I think you're going to see a shift, particularly in the support for working parents. I think
Mm,
in the pandemic, when children were being homeschooled and the pressures that were particularly on working moms and working dads, in really integrating um, those two parts of their lives, I think you're going to see a significant shift in working parents taking advantage of the support and resources that their organizations provide, whether it's through backup childcare, whether it's through a flexible work arrangement to be able to better manage
mm.
the needs that you're seeing. You're seeing, many more fathers taking paternity leave. Is
Yep.
now some of the stigma that was around that, I think, is has lessened, and now men are more engaged and more comfortable to engage in that. So I think you're going to see a bit of a continued shift in that focus of really about how we support working families in our organizations. I think there's going to be an increased focus on data and data transparency amongst organizations. I think there's a lot of desire for employees, for clients, for consumers to understand how organizations are progressing on this journey. Like, how are we holding ourselves accountable? And I think there's
Yeah.
going to be a continued interest in desire and request for data and examining data and really understanding what the data is telling us. So I think that's also going to be another big shift, I think, as we continue this work. And I also, finally, I would say DE&I, for my background experience, DE&I is the lens through which I look at all organizational processes and behaviors, right? I think you're going to see an expansion potentially of the areas of focus for DE&I leaders. I think it will move beyond what I would call traditional DE&I and start to focus on things around culture, things
Mm,
around employee experience,
right.
areas in more ways that I think were traditionally in other spaces or hadn't gotten attention.
Yeah.
Well-being, for example, I think is another one. So I think you'll see an expansion of the responsibilities of DE&I leaders as well, and all of those things, I think, will produce positive outcomes for the organizations.
That's, I mean, I love that. So you really start to see it as being almost like a holistic construct, maybe even almost like an operating approach for businesses going forward across everything, which is really great. And I certainly can see how that's shaping up. Well, Azuree, it's been amazing to talk to you today on Uncaged. We've been speaking to Azuree Montoute-Lewis. She is the global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Hill+Knowlton Strategies. Azuree, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where should they find you?
I'm one of the very few Azurees on LinkedIn. So if you put my name in the search, you will more than likely find me in your top page of results. So
Abs-
definitely feel free to connect.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on Uncaged today, and we look forward to having you back.
Yes, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.